if God is in total control, right? Why does He not eliminate all evil and sufferings? Or if God is truly sovereign, why do people have free will? And while exercising this free will, man make both good but mostly bad choices. Suffice to say, God is sovereign and each of us is truly responsible for the choices we make. We may not fully understand how these two work together, but the Bible teaches that they do. Furthermore, the Bible teaches that God's thoughts are not the same as ours. God's ways are not our ways. Isaiah 55, 8 and 9. God's sovereignty is a truth that covers all aspects of our life and becomes an important part of our being. God's sovereignty is a humbling doctrine. It reminds us that God is God and we are not. Although there are some people who think that they are God, that they can do anything. It is also an exalting doctrine because we are prompted that the one true living God is the master of our lives. God's sovereignty is also a clarifying doctrine. It teaches God's children that there is no such thing as luck, fate, or coincidence. It is an empowering doctrine. By understanding God's sovereignty in all aspects of our lives, we will respect God's authority and be obedient to His will. What Pastor Rick Warren experienced also happened to Stephen, albeit many times distressing and heartrending. Who is Stephen? Let me go on. Mr. Stephen was blameless and upright, a man who feared God and shunned evil. He was successful, rich, very rich, and has a family with 7 sons and 3 daughters, and with a large number of workers. Stephen was the greatest man among all the people in his community. One day, while Stephen's children were celebrating at his oldest son's place, a servant came to him with very bad news. The servant told Stephen, "Your enemies attacked, killed your workers, except me, plundered, and then looted your properties." Another employee came to him and told him that while his children were feasting, were celebrating, a tornado swept on his house, which collapsed and killed all his children. We know that story about Mr. Stephen. We could read that in Job, chapter 1. Steve Job. Job chapter 1, we read, when the Lord asked Satan to consider his servant Job, a blameless and upright man, a man not like any other on earth, God basically allowed Satan in his power to take everything that Job possesses except his life. God permitted Satan to do evil with Job, short of taking away his life. On that day, Satan, with the Father's permission, took everything from Job except his and his wife's life. In Job 1 verses 20 to 22, after these painful and heartbreaking experiences, Job tore his robe, shaved his head, fell to the ground, and worshiped God. In verse 22, in all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. Job's story teaches us that God is sovereign. He is sovereign. He is in control, even in our struggles or sufferings. Who among you today does not suffer or have not suffered yet? Can you raise your hand if you have not suffered or is not suffering right now? Can I see some hands? No? At one point in our life, we experienced suffering. We remember the story of Joseph, who out of his brother's jealousy was sold in slavery. At 17 years of age, Joseph was separated from his dad, Jacob, his mom, Rachel, and his siblings, 17 years old. I'm living by myself. There are times that I feel lonely. I cry to God. What am I doing here? My wife is in Canada. Joseph was loved and hated. He was exalted and abased. He was tempted and trusted. Yet at no point in the 110-year life of Joseph did he ever seem to get his eyes off God or cease to trust Him. He never questioned God. Sufferings did not make him bitter. Adversities did not harden Joseph's character. I remember the TV show about Joseph years ago. Our TV was even black and white. So it was years ago. I remember that scene when Joseph met his brothers in Egypt after years of separation. And he told his brothers, Joseph was sitting on his throne, and his brothers were in front of him. And Joseph told his brothers, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, Joseph was telling his brothers, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus, Joseph comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Genesis 50, verses 19 to 21. Even prosperity did not ruin Joseph. Going back to Jacob, or to John, in chapter 42, we read that the Lord restored Job's fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. Verse 10, the Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part. Verse 12. In verses 16 and 17, it says, Job lived 140 years. He saw his children and their children to the fourth generation. And so Job died, an old man and full of years. Imagine that, 140 years. So I have 100 years remaining. Did you do the arithmetic? Here we see that God is sovereign in our successes. Oh. Right?